Welcome to this fourth episode in the Rhythmic Lectures series. Today I'm going to be discussing a short and simple topic, which is nested rhythms and nested tuplets. These are actually quite advanced in theory, yet actually relatively simple once we understand what's going on, so this needn't be a long or complex video. Nested tuplets are something that can be quite shocking when you first encounter them on the page. They can leave a lot of people scratching their heads in wonder at how do we read these, how do we play these, whereas the reality is they're actually quite simple. That doesn't mean they're easy, but they're actually relatively simple once we wrap our heads around what's going on. So in the context in which we're discussing them today, nested rhythms and nested tuplets refer to rhythmic figures or tuplets which appear or exist inside larger tuplets. So we get into this concept of layering tuplets or rhythms within tuplets. This really comes down to changing our rhythmic context, changing the context in which we are imagining rhythms occurring. Again, that sounds like a little bit of a mouthful, but it's not as complicated as it seems. So to address the issue of nested rhythms and nested tuplets, we are simply going to work with a running example, and we're going to build on this example as we encounter slightly more complex terms or slightly more complex concepts or elements. And as we shall see, they're not all that complex at all. So we are going to begin, without any other context at all, quite simply with 5 16th notes. The choice of 16th notes is arbitrary, it's a practical choice for the sake of this demonstration. But for the time being, we are just simply conceiving of 5 16th notes. So these are 5 notes, all evenly spaced, and we're going to count them 1 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our context. This is the context in which we are going to be working. Now, within this context, because we have the 16th notes already determined, we can apply the standard rules of rhythm to these. We can combine 2 16th notes together to create an 8th note. We can half a 16th note to create 2 32nd notes, and any other variation of rhythmic manipulation pertaining to these 16th notes as they would usually occur. We are going to build a rhythmic figure comprising these 5 16th notes. So to begin, we are going to combine the first 2 16th notes into an 8th note. So the 8th note is worth 2 16th notes, so it takes up the first 2 of those 5 16th notes. So our rhythm now sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because that first 8th note takes up the first 2 16th notes. Next, we are going to take the third 16th note and divide it in half to create 2 32nd notes. As we know, 32nd notes are worth half a 16th note and therefore, in this context, occur twice as fast. So our rhythm now runs an 8th note, 2 32nd notes, and then the remaining 2 16th notes. We still have the same total value of the initial 5 16th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can start to see we are building up a rhythmic figure in the normal way. Finally, we have these 2 remaining 16th notes at the end. We are going to convert those into a 16th note triplet. As you may recall from the previous video, tuplets are a modifier which convert x into the space of y. So taking a simple 16th note triplet here, we arrive at 3 16th notes in the space of 2. So currently there are 2 16th notes left at the end of our figure. We're going to convert them into 3 with the use of a 16th note triplet. So our figure now sounds like this. And that figure is worth the same as the initial 5 16th notes. It takes up the same amount of time and the total values are the same. So we have derived a rhythmic figure, a simple, discrete rhythmic idea based on an initial starting condition of 5 16th notes. Now we're going to stick all of this inside a quintuplet bracket. So in other words, we are now going to designate our initial 5 16th notes as a quintuplet. So those initial 5 16th notes take up the space of 1 quarter note. Now this is a lot easier than it seems. This is a lot more simple than it might seem, because when you see this written down, seeing all of these rhythms and that triplet within nested within a quintuplet, it can be quite daunting. But all this is really saying is all of this rhythmic figure that we have just developed is taking space inside one quarter note. We know that the base 16th note quintuplet takes one quarter note to complete. So everything we've just done has to take place within that same quarter note. So all we really need to do is feel the beat at the beginning of each rendition of that figure. Now, that particular figure in 4/4 can't be played any other way. To get that exact rhythmic figure as it corresponds to the underlying quarter note pulse of the 4/4 time signature, we have to nest it inside that quintuple bracket, that quintuplet bracket. We can't get the exact same rhythm any other way in the 4/4 time signature. So nested rhythms, nested tuplets exist to help us get very specific rhythms that we can't ordinarily get in the meter. I use quite a lot of nested rhythms inside my own compositions. One that I like to use a lot is to combine paradiddles and paradiddle diddles in a septuple figure. So if we take a paradiddle diddle, it takes 3 16th notes if I'm feeling that as 32nd notes. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm counting 16th notes, so I'm playing 32nd notes. That's the way I'm conceiving it. So this paradiddle diddle figure of 6 strokes takes 3 16th notes to complete. If I then add to that a normal paradiddle of 16th notes, we have 7 16th notes in total. The 3 16th notes of the 32nd note paradiddle diddle figure and the 4 16th notes of the paradiddle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So again, we can simply now designate that that entire figure, the paradiddle diddle 32nd notes and the paradiddle 16th notes, takes place in one septuplet bracket. In other words, the whole figure takes up 7 16th notes, which occur in the space of one quarter note. So again, very simply, I'm going to feel the whole figure against one quarter note. And there we have our nested rhythm of a septuplet figure. We are very able to apply a tuplet to that as we did in the previous example. So the paradiddle at the end of that figure, we can convert the last 2 16th notes into a triplet. I'm going to change the sticking, but the initial basis is still the same. So again, against one quarter note, we can hear that nested figure occurring in the space of one septuplet against one quarter note. Now, what happens when we get slightly more advanced figures where the top layer quintuplet or the top layer tuplet itself is not over one quarter note? Maybe we have something like an 8th note quintuplet, which takes place over 2 quarter notes. Well, in essence, the same rules still apply. So let's say we are now dealing with an 8th note quintuplet. We have 5 8th notes in the space of 4. In other words, this is 5 8th notes against 2 quarter notes, essentially giving us a 5/2 polyrhythm. Or if you want to hear it a different way, this is the quarter note beat, this is the 8th note quintuplet, we have 5 8th notes against 2 quarter notes. The same rules still apply. So we can change the first 8th note to 2 16th notes. And so on. We can add in tuplets, we can add in 16th notes, 32nd notes, we can combine the 8th notes into a quarter note. It all applies in exactly the same way, we're just envisaging it differently. we're changing the context. So the easiest way to tackle these nested rhythms, these nested tuplets, is to simply remove the top bracket first. If you remove the top bracket, what's left? You probably have a very simple rhythm that you're not going to have much trouble actually playing. As we've said in the first example, we've got an 8th note, 2 32nd notes, a 16th note triplet. On its own, that's not particularly difficult. The difficulty comes in seeing that top layer tuplet and being unsure how that all fits together. So if you remove that top layer tuplet first, you see the rhythm you've got, then all the top layer tuplet is telling you is the space in which you have to perform that figure. So if you learn the figure first, what it sounds like, how to play it, and whichever instrument you're using, you then simply have to think, okay, I've got the figure, I know how it is supposed to sound, now what space have I got in which to perform it? In the case of a tuplet over 1 beat, you're just cramming all of that rhythmic figure into 1 quarter note. In the instance of a tuplet over 2 beats, you're stretching that tuplet, that rhythmic figure, over 2 quarter notes. It will take a little bit of time, but when you start thinking of the figure outside of that top layer tuplet, you're learning the rhythm as you would normally using it, then just applying it into a slightly different or unfamiliar context. So I hope this has given you something to think about. As always, the lecture notes are available on my website, the links of which are in the description below, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Rhythm Lectures video. Thank you very much.